What are some comments, questions, objections?
Will you
Yes.
will you go over the willing but hypothetical imperative problem again, like in your example with the bathroom? Like, I didn't quite understand.
Okay, so basically, a hypothetical
I know by definition what it is, but
Oh, okay. So it's any given means. Like for example, cars. Or here's another one: flying southwest. Right? If all of us try to fly southwest at the exact same time, there won't be enough seats. So people who don't understand the difference between hypothetical and categorical imperative will be like, oh, well then no one can fly on airplanes because if everyone tries to fly at the exact same time on Southwest, then no one can fly on Southwest because there won't be enough seats. Right? But you'll notice that's a hypothetical. It's a means, not an end. The actual categorical imperative is it's right to travel using the means of our society to get to locations that we would want to go. Right? That would be the maximum. And in principle, we could I mean, there might the only objection to that would actually be an environmentalist or a green objection. Right? Because they would say, no, as a matter of fact. Does that make sense? But saying, oh, no, there wouldn't be enough seats would not be inappropriate.
The hypothetical applies to the situation specifically. I think this is actually in the textbook, right? If you're going to go to the, right, okay, if you're going to,
I don't know what
if you're going to drive long,
about,
well, if you're going to drive long distances, you should probably put gas in your car, right? It applies to a certain situation, whether you're going to be traveling long distances. But if you're just going to, but that's contingent on whether or not your gas tank is empty. If your gas tank is full, there shouldn't be an imperative to fill the gas tank. Or if you're just going to drive to the store and back and you don't need to fill the gas tank, then the imperative doesn't apply. It applies to that very specific situation in which your gas tank is empty, or it's going to probably be empty.
Yeah, my big thing is just, it's not an objection to any given action if it's a hypothetical imperative. So that's a mistake that people often make, is they mistake a hypothetical for the categorical. If you understand the difference between a hypothetical and a categorical, then there's no problem. I'm just using that as a general example to show how someone could make that mistake.
yeah, I ask it because I think I do make mistakes. Sometimes it's hard to. I think sometimes like the idea is categorical, but the way it's expressed is hypothetical. Like we debated whether or not it would be okay at certain times to use a handicapped parking spot if the other handicapped parking spots were available. Would that be an example of then a hypothetical imperative, not a categorical? Would a categorical imperative that disallowed that be more, one should follow law that respects the rights of those who are handicapped and not necessarily the specific, you cannot park here?
Yeah, I mean, so this is why that would be an immoral act for a regular deontologist. Because the categorical imperative is one should always follow the laws that assist those worst off in society. You'll notice that can be universalized to everyone, right? Whether you're rich or poor, whether you're healthy or sick. So that is a valid categorical imperative. Well, in this case, hypothetically, if you park in a handicapped spot, right, because you are possibly diminishing the resources of those who are the worst off in society, then you would actually be violating that categorical imperative, even though, so this is actually the reverse problem, even though the hypothetical looks like it's okay, as a matter of fact, it would be in conflict with the categorical imperative, which is to take care of the worst off in society. But here's also an important distinction, right? This is why some libertarians believe they're Kantians or are Kantians. The very essence of autonomy is that one chooses one's categorical imperatives, right? This is a criticism of Kant. Kant doesn't tell you how to apply the categorical imperative. No, that's not a criticism of Kant. The problem is you're a moral agent and are therefore responsible or autonomous, so it's up to you to apply, right? So a libertarian could create a libertopia that I certainly wouldn't want to live in, which is one has no obligations to anyone else in society. Or one has no obligations to anyone else in society except for the law or mutual consent. Now that could be universalizable just as easily as one has a universal duty to those who are the worst off in society. You'll notice they're conflicting, but both are universalizable. And it's only autonomy that gives us the ability or forces on us the responsibility to choose which one. Right? And then, of course, all sorts of hypothetical imperatives will come out of whichever one we choose. Does that answer / clarify?
And I guess, do you see, like, right, cons, the notion of the kingdom of ends itself, like, once we all as rational agents develop, I guess I'll say general will of the categorical imperative. How do you see that sort of playing out?
Well, this is actually the third formulation of the categorical imperative, which I didn't cover, which is one should will as though one is willing the kingdom of ends. So this notion is that what we are is we're in a sort of republic of willing. So when we will something for someone else, right, like we should take care of the worse off in our society, we can simultaneously will that as rational agents, but then we're also responsible for everything we will, right? So then in turn, if we will that, then we can't park in the handicapped spot. We need to pay a little bit more in taxes for welfare or services, unless we ourselves are in the worst. But yeah, so does that kind of answer, clarify?
I mean, well, the way I read Rousseau, though, is the general will itself is strictly based on the notion of universality, of like the actual good of all. And insofar as what Rousseau wants to say is, once we get out of the state of nature and get into civil society, the way civil society, the way the sovereign actually works is that we all, it's basically the people as such in the state and the sovereign in action. But what it is conceptualized as is we will things that are going to be universalizable to everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I'm going off Kant, not Rousseau.
That's
yeah,
true.
But yeah, I mean, that there's nothing controversial about that. You can't have a categorical imperative, which is black people don't have the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you can't universalize it. Because as a matter of fact, not everyone is black, and it would not apply to them. It would not apply to all of us equally. Right? So what would happen is it would only apply to a fraction, which would again make it a hypothetical imperative, which couldn't possibly be justified by a categorical imperative, unless one wants to take the incredibly racist position that black people aren't in fact rational subjects, which in fact some people, as Kantians, tried to do. They said black people aren't rational, ergo no rational ends apply to them. But that's a really stupid position to have, and there's no reason for you to have that. So it could conceptually be a problem, but as a matter of fact is not a problem. And this goes with all other laws that target a specificity, people who are left-handed, women, rather than a universal law. Does that qualify? Okay. Any other questions, objections, clarifications?
When you're looking at bad use subject and the non-subject of a bad subject, I guess, would that give I guess like a different set of situations for non-subjects of how they would be treated by, say, subjects, or are they still viewed as essentially just non-subjects, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And of course, non-subjects are treated differently by a subject. They have a different relation to the subject. For example, let's go with the party. The party, from Badiou's conception and the traditional Marxist-Leninist conception, organizes the proletariat as a class. This means it organizes the proletariat to action. Those proletarians who are not part of the party are inactive. And so, of course, the relation is one of action to inaction. Not necessarily we can do whatever we want with you, but that. And so what the party's relation, for example, to the inactive proletariat would be a call, right? A call to justice to the inactive, to make them part of the subjectivity, to make them part of the action.